there's one other case, a defamation case.
Yes.
Where do things stand on that front?
Oh, I love that case. I have never been more excited in my life for something. Because here's the thing about defamation. Your defense against slander is the truth. And if I say something, you mark it in your book because it'll be the truth. So I welcome that lawsuit. Now, what she's not aware of is what we're sitting on.
Reality TV couple Todd and Julie Chrisley have been found guilty of multiple federal charges. Todd and Julie have been respectively sentenced to 12 and 7 years in prison. In addition to their prison sentences, each received an order of 16 months probation from District Judge Eleanor Ross in Atlanta. Federal prosecutors said the couple was driven by greed as they engaged in an extensive bank fraud scheme and then hid their wealth from tax authorities while flaunting their lavish lifestyle. So, how have they reacted, and will they be appealing the sentence? Let's find out. The Chrisleys gained fame with their USA Network reality show Chrisley Knows Best, which follows their tight-knit, boisterous family. They were found guilty on federal charges in June and sentenced by District Judge Eleanor Ross in a hearing that began recently. The Chrisleys have built an empire based on the lie that their wealth came from dedication and hard work. Prosecutors wrote, "The jury's unanimous verdict sets the record straight. Todd and Julie Chrisley are career swindlers who have made a living by jumping from one fraud scheme to another, lying to banks, stiffing vendors, and evading taxes at every corner." The Chrisleys disagreed with the government's guideline calculations. Todd's lawyers wrote in a filing that he should not face more than 9 years in prison and that the judge should sentence him below the lower end of the guidelines. On the other hand, Julie's lawyers wrote that a reasonable sentence for her would be probation with special conditions and no prison time. The upper range for her was about 12 and a half years. The couple was convicted in June on charges of bank fraud, tax evasion, and conspiring to defraud the IRS. Julie was also convicted of wire fraud and obstruction of justice. Todd and Julie's oldest daughter, Lindsay Chrisley, spoke out after her parents' verdict in what pundits believe is a message from her parents. "I know most of you were expecting to hear from me on my podcast this week as I took time to be with my family last week," Lindsay wrote on Instagram stories. "The verdict is not what I had hoped or prayed for, and I am deeply saddened for myself, my son, and my family as a whole. Please pray for us during this difficult time and know that I will be back when the time is right," she concluded. "Thank you for your continued love and support." Prosecutors have said the couple submitted fake documents to banks and managed to secure more than $30 million in fraudulent loans. Once that scheme fell apart, they walked away from their responsibility to repay the loans when Todd declared bankruptcy. While in bankruptcy, they started their reality show and flaunted their wealth and lifestyle to the American public. Prosecutors wrote, "When they began making millions from their show, they hid the money from the IRS to avoid paying taxes." According to prosecutors, the couple submitted a false document to a grand jury investigating their crimes and then convinced friends and family members to tell lies while testifying under oath during their trial. Neither of them has shown any remorse, and they have blamed others for their own criminal conduct. The law enforcers say, according to the prosecutors, while her husband was in bankruptcy proceedings, Julie created false financial documents to rent a home in Los Angeles. Once in the house, they failed to pay rent, and the property owner filed an eviction lawsuit. It was around the time that Todd filed for bankruptcy that the Chrisleys began to star in their reality show. It was recorded in the Atlanta area at first and then in Nashville. Prosecutors said they earned millions from the show and conspired with Tarantino to defraud the IRS. They operated a loan-out company that collected their income from the show and other ventures and kept the corporate bank accounts in Julie's name to avoid the collection of $500,000 in back taxes that Todd owed. Prosecutors said when the IRS asked for information on the bank accounts, they transferred ownership to Todd's mother to try to further hide his income from the tax authorities. Prosecutors said the couple failed to file tax returns or pay taxes for several years, despite Todd claiming on a radio program that he paid $750,000 to $1 million a year in federal income taxes. Tarantino filed 2 false corporate tax returns for the loan-out company, falsely saying it earned no money and made no distributions in 2015 and 2016. Prosecutors said, in response to a grand jury subpoena, Julie submitted a false document to make it look like the Chrisleys hadn't lied to the bank when they transferred ownership of the loan-out company to her husband's mother. Prosecutors told the judge. Todd's lawyers wrote in a court filing that the government never produced any evidence that he meant to defraud any of the banks and that the loss amount calculated by the government was incorrect. They also noted that the offenses he was convicted of were committed long ago. He has no serious criminal history and has medical conditions that would make imprisonment disproportionately harsh, they wrote. His lawyers went ahead and submitted letters from friends and business associates that show a history of good deeds and striving to help others. They claimed that people who rely on Todd, including his mother and the scores of people employed by his television shows, will be harmed while he's in prison. The couple's accountant, Peter Tarantino, was also sentenced wide to 36 months in prison for his role in committing fraud on his client's behalf. During the emotional sentencing hearing, Assistant U.S. Attorney Annalise Peters showed footage of the Chrisleys bragging about spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on clothes from their 30,000 square foot home while avoiding taxes and in the middle of bankruptcy. Of course, there is nothing bad about being rich. There is nothing wrong about making lots of money, she said. It's the American dream. But also, essential to being American, she said, is paying taxes. Both Todd and Julie addressed the court, asking for leniency. Todd, choking up, said in his statement that his wife is the caregiver for their 2 children, Grayson and Chloe. My wife Julie should not be punished to the same scale. He said. Julie, on her part, sobbed as she told the court she was most concerned for her children. To hear your 10-year-old say she doesn't want to live if their mom goes away, no child should feel that way, she said of her adopted daughter Chloe as the courtroom filled with audible emotion. District Judge Eleanor Ross allowed both Chrisleys to surrender themselves to custody. Ross said that in most cases before her, there are children who are left behind when their parents are sentenced. It is heartbreaking, but it has to be burdened by the defendants, Ross said. I've never heard any acceptance of any crime, she added. I've never really heard any admission to any wrongdoing or any remorse, Ross told the Chrisleys. I have no reason to doubt that both Chrisleys have good hearts, she said. But I cannot ignore the greed and flamboyance in this case. Both Todd and Julie were sentenced below what the federal sentencing guidelines laid out due to their age, health, and the fact that they care for Todd's mother, Faye Chrisley, who has bladder cancer, and other relatives. Ross recommended that Julie be allowed to serve her sentence at FCI Tallahassee and Todd be allowed to serve at FCI Pensacola, as they asked. The fraud came to light when the couple's former business partner, Mark Braddock, who was also participating in the scheme, informed tax officers and later prosecutors about the years of crime. Braddock was offered immunity for his testimony. The former part owner of Todd Chrisley's management company also told the jury that he had an intimate relationship with Todd for about a year. He said they later became like brothers, and he committed fraud on behalf of the Chrisleys and also for his own benefit. Throughout the trial, Todd's lawyer, Bruce Morris, called Braddock a criminal who was obsessed with Todd and vengeful when he ended their business relationship. In closing arguments, Morris called the alleged affair pure fantasy. As for the state of their reality shows, several episodes have already been filmed for season 10 of Chrisley Knows Best. They were filmed right before the trial began and are expected to air sometime next year on USA Network, according to several sources. As for their spin-off series, Todd's upcoming speed dating show, Love Limo, will not be moving forward. Their most recent Chrisley Confessions podcast episode aired on November 17th, with no word yet on the future of the show. After they were found guilty, Judge Eleanor Ross allowed the Chrisleys to remain free on bond. But she placed them on location monitoring and home detention, meaning they could only leave the house for specific reasons, including work, medical appointments, and court appearances. They also have to alert their probation officers to any spending over $1,000 according to the order entered a day after the sentence. So, is this the end of the Chrisleys dynasty, or should we expect a twist to this never-ending family tale? Let's wait and see.